Hey everyone, this is Aaron. Thanks for listening again to the Unscripted Podcast. You know, when I started this thing, we were doing Zoom. I didn't have a microphone. We didn't have sound equipment. I'd like to think we've gotten better over the years as it has gone along. At least I hope so. But one of the things I wish I could always do is go back. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back and I'm going to remaster some of the great guests. We've had so many guests. We're coming up on 300 episodes. I've had so many great guests. And I just want to go back and remaster and redo some of those interviews to the level that those guests deserve. Honestly, they all deserve it. I'm just going to pick a handful. And so this is Aaron's version, unscripted.
Hey everyone, this is Caitlin. Today's remastered Aaron's version episode is with our friend Bart Millard of the Christian band MercyMe. This is actually an interview that took place between my Uncle Aaron, four-time All-Star NBA player Mark Price, and Bart. My uncle has edited it down and remastered it to some of the most important parts and quotes. Thank you, Bart, for joining my Uncle Aaron. Thank you for the music, thank you for your heart, and thank you for your testimony. We pick up this Aaron's version as Bart is talking about the song I Can Only Imagine and the film by the same name.
We opened with the fact that Mark's favorite song is I Can Only Imagine. And I think Mark maybe is not the only one. I think there's probably people out there that have I Can Only Imagine as their favorite song. Mark, do you want to ask some questions about the movie? Because I know you had some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I just, was curious because, you see people do movies about people's life story. And first of all, to have somebody want to do that, I mean, that's just got to be incredible. But my first question about that would just be, were you pleased how it turned out? Did it feel like it was on track? You know what I'm saying?
I wasn't sure how to feel because I never experienced it, and I was very involved from day one. It took about 8 years from when somebody had the idea to it actually happening. And some of this lady in a production company, she had this idea. She wanted to make a movie about. She was asking around the most popular song at the time, and she didn't ask me. She asked other people, and apparently, when she finally got to us, she goes, "Everybody at the time saying Shout to the Lord or I Can Only Imagine," and I'm assuming Shout to the Lord didn't have a story because I was second, and she never told me, but she decided she wanted to go with this movie, and I didn't believe it. I was like, okay, whatever, good luck with that. It's never going to happen. And all I remember is that when they do this, they have to buy your life rights, is what they call it. And what it'd be like if there's a part of your story, Mark, that they want to tell, they'll pay you. It's not much, like $3 or $4 grand a year, to say no one else has the right to tell the story. Give us a year to make some progress. And when a year's up, you can either say no, or we'll give you another $3 or $4 grand and we'll keep working. Well, so I'd get like a check for $3 or $4 grand for like 5, 6, 7 years. And it's not much, but I never thought the movie's going to happen. I was like, if you just want to hand over, I'll take my kids to Disney or something. Thanks for doing this. And so it was so long that I thought, man, they're crazy. They keep paying me for this. I mean, this could go on forever, because sometimes they say that some of these movie companies will do that for 25 years to hang on to a book or something that may never happen, but they don't want anybody else to do it. That's what I'd heard. So I was like, all right. So that was the end of it for me. And then about 6 years in, she sold her company. So I thought it was over, and the Irwin brothers happened to buy the rights to the movie. And then, so in a way, it's been 6 or 7 years, but it started over. And so it took about 2 years to write the script and film and get it all, so I could release it. And it went from slow as molasses to like kind of a whirlwind, like, and so from casting to, they interviewed me for hours and hours on video, just trying to get the story. And so we're so immersed in it that, I remember telling my wife, we were getting to the point where it's almost done. And I was like, she goes, what do you think? I was like, I honestly have no idea, because I have to believe that whoever made those awful movies you've ever seen, didn't they have to believe it was going to be good at some point? It's like, no one just sitting there making terrible movies. And so I thought, I have such vertigo in this thing. It may be terrible. Like, I think it's okay, but I have no idea because, somebody had to believe in Ishtar at some point or something like that. And so I didn't know what to think until it was, I remember when I read the first draft of the script, it was very emotional. When I went to watch them film, it was all filmed in the state of Oklahoma. It was very emotional to see all these scenes, even though it's like, Dennis Quaid and it's pretend. I never realized how emotional it would be to watch the doctor tell Dennis Quaid he has cancer as my dad. Like it was very strange and in some ways therapeutic. And then finally watching it, the first edit was emotional, but then when I finally saw it with an audience and saw how they responded, you talk about people that talk about how they're upset about a movie it's told about them. I just want to believe that doesn't happen until the crowd decides if they like it or not, because it's so long to make an album. There's so many times you could say, I'm out, I don't want to do it, but they keep hanging on there. Then they'll go, I'm so embarrassed. I think it's like they're covering their tails when the crowd doesn't or doesn't. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I can't imagine somebody being shocked that it's bad when it takes 2 to 3 years to make. Anyway, so watching with an audience and just seeing the emotion was incredibly emotional. And it's funny, I was so wrapped up in telling the story, and people ask how accurate it is. And I always say it's like trying to cram 25 years of my life into 2 hours.
Right.
There are things that are incredibly inaccurate. Like I grew up in a little ranch home in the middle of town, not on a farm, but it looked better on the screen. And they would explain that stuff to me. And I didn't, you pick the things that are a big deal to you that you want to hang on to. And for me, I didn't care about that stuff. I cared about I wanted the abuse to be fairly accurate and not watered down so that the redemption story would have value and things like that. And so the things that were important to me, they handled with kid gloves and were very accurate. Some of the small details, like, my high school was red and white, not green, stuff like that I, and then the time frame is always kind of compressed to where this stuff happened over about a 7-year period, where in the movie it feels like it happened in a week. But other than that, once I realized that's kind of how movies are made, it was because at first I was like, that's not right. This is not right, or whatever. And once I got over that and realized, okay, the things that are important to me are in place, then I was able to kind of relax and enjoy it. And so looking back, I'm incredibly pleased, but it took me a little bit to get there. Not that I was bitter, just I was kind of numb to it. I'm not sure how I feel, and then you hear enough stories. The thing that I think the part, not all of it's embarrassing or whatever, is that I got so wrapped up in the making of the movie, I totally forgot or lost sight of the ministry aspect of it, to be honest with you. I remember the first time we watched with an audience, I'm sitting there thinking, was this joke funny? Was the timing good? That kind of stuff. And then I watched this guy, we're leaving and we're standing out shaking hands stuff. And this lady says, this one man won't leave the theater. And so they go back in and we're kind of looking at the door, like, what's going on? And I'm not sure who it was, but he was in tears and he was like, I can't leave until I get my father on the phone. And he wanted to deal with this relationship with his dad that had been, not in a good place for a long time. And he goes, just give me a second. And just kept trying to call him and was crying. And that was the first time I was like, oh no, how does it slip your mind when you're in ministry of the impact this could have on, fathers and sons and relationships. And it was weird. I was a little embarrassed by it, but then it was all of a sudden it felt brand new, because these movies, it's kind of like writing a song. I'll listen to a song 1,000 times before you ever hear it. And the last thing it is when it releases to me is brand new. It's like, okay, I'm ready to move on to something else. And the movie's even worse, as much time they spent on that for years.
Right.
And so that kind of gave it new life for me, on the day that it opened, and it was like an avalanche of response. And it's not like anything I've ever seen.
Well, it's just, it was amazing, for me personally. And I just want to thank you guys for doing that and be willing to do that, because I can't even imagine how many lives you touch for the kingdom. Just your transparency of your life. I mean, sharing, those things with, when that movie came out, what year did that movie come out?
18, I believe. Yeah.
18. But, I lost my father. I had a good relationship with my father, but I lost him, early. He died when he was 62. And so there was just, I think, like me, and no matter what people were dealing with, whether it be abuse or just loss of your father or a loved one, that song and that movie just, it meant a lot to me, because I think for so many people, it's like we think of heaven, right, all the time, and you talk about heaven, but you guys gave us a little bit of a glimpse through that song of, man, what it is to look forward to. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it was just so awesome. But just wanted to tell you how much that song means to me, and that's why it's my favorite, and not because it's everybody else's favorite, but it's just, it was awesome the first time I heard it, and that movie was great. And as far as the movie goes, I guess my only other question is, did you get to meet Dennis Quaid?
Yeah, we've become really good friends, and during the pandemic, he moved to Nashville, and so I see him every once in a while. He's a great guy. I think all actors are random, but it's like, he's an interesting character. Like, we're good friends, but it's like the movie. It was funny because during that thing, he was like he just want to talk about. I think he grew up in like a Baptist church in Houston, and as a kid, and his mom, who just passed away not long ago, was like his world to him. And he goes, man, I've done so many dang movies, and my mom was more excited about this song and this movie than anything. Like, she was like, finally kind of stuff. And so it was kind of a weird time. And he's a musician, and he kept writing songs during the movie that, and they were all really just songs that his mom always hoped he'd write. So that was kind of a cool journey. Nothing that anybody'd ever really hear or whatever, but he kept writing these spiritual songs. And there was kind of this sweet, innocence to it. I think he'd be the first to admit that, he's not the greatest songwriter, but it doesn't matter when it's that sincere. It was like, man, how do you not enjoy this? And so, it's, it was an interesting time. I don't know much about him. I've just, other than what the news may say. And I know at that time, like, he always kept telling me that the movie was perfect timing for his life. And yeah, he's become a good friend, which is weird. I don't know. Like I said, I've never done it before. Don't know how it works. And figured that I would meet him and that'd be the end of it. But yeah, we've stayed in touch. You know what's funny about, you're talking about you and your dad, and when I realized, I always thought, okay, this movie will have something that, deal with people that don't have a good relationship with their dad, and it'll probably be targeted towards that. And I used to go to this men's group here, Bible study, and it was like this friend of ours put this group together of, his whole idea was, there's some people, it'd be like if you lived here, some people going to a regular small group would be hard for them, like, and then not become a meet and greet. Right. And so it was like, in this group was like me and like Barry Zito and R.A. Dickey and For King and Country and all these different people of different walks of life, Dave Ramsey and all these people. And we were, one night, the guy that heads it up was asking, like, let's talk about your relationship with your dads. And this was, I don't know if the movie was even finished. We were still making the movie. And I was like, oh, I got this one knocked out of the park. Like, I'm sitting there going, I'm going to have the worst story. I'm going to win, whatever that means. And so everybody was telling their stories. And so I went through mine. I'll never forget. I think it might have been Barry Zito. I can't remember who it was, but he was talking about, he goes, my dad was perfect. Like, he's my best friend. Like, he was there for everything. And he kept saying it. And I'm like, okay, you win, but I'm like, there's nothing here. But it's funny because then he said, and I ended up going to therapy because I could never get out of his shadow or be what I wanted him to be so proud of me because he was so great. Because I'm sitting there going, I'm going to therapy because of the abuse, and I just want my dad to even know that I exist. And then I had this moment where I was like, what the heck? Good or bad, we're all going to therapy trying to figure out who we are in comparison to our dad, whether they're the most amazing human at all. And I just never forget, like, when the movie came out, hearing a lot of stories of like both ends of the spectrum. It wasn't like my dad was never there. It was, my dad was always there, and I adore him to this day. And I feel like I can never be half the man that he is, to where some people would struggle with that. And I was like, man, it's just amazing how God would use the movie, which I thought was in a specific story, but that it kind of had such a much bigger reach than I ever thought possible, even with that song and over the years. And so, but yeah, when you mentioned that, I thought that's the one story I was like, oh, okay. We're a lot more similar than I thought, because I thought I'm an abused kid or whatever, and this guy had the perfect relationship, but all of a sudden we're still wrestling with our identity outside of our father.
Well, I think that just goes to, from a spiritual perspective, how important fathers play, the role that they play in the lives of their children. And for men to obviously, one, love the Lord, to be that example to their children, but to, just to be that rock, that leader that God created us to be. And I think, we see a culture right now in so many ways where guys are abdicating that responsibility, or they're running from it, or fathers are being put down in the, in the media in so many ways. And, we're always the dumb guy, on the sitcoms and this and that. And yet, what you've seen, through all this is, what an important piece the father is in all their kids' lives. And it's a humbling, but, responsibility that we as fathers and believers, when we're trying to do it the right way, I mean, it just benefits our kids in so many ways. Yeah. And good times and bad times. But, man, fathers just gotta show up, man. You gotta keep showing up, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is like, it's kind of the front line, if you will. Like, I think, yeah, you're right. It's dumbed down so much, and it's almost like it's I don't know. It's like there's this impression that it's not a huge deal. And I think that that's part of the way the enemy's winning, is that how he kind of desensitized to, the role that a father plays, and it just keeps just knocking them down. Man, I mean, I spent half my life believing the lies of the enemy that I wasn't equipped, that my dad wasn't great at it, so I'm not going to be great at it. And it was, I think, my doctor that delivered me, that's still alive. He told me one day out of the blue, he was like, "Hey man," when we had our first kid, actually, he was like, "Hey, if you're just worried about whether you're a good parent or not, you're probably a pretty good parent." And he's like, "It's just the fact that you hang on to it." Because I promise there's some that just don't care at all. And he's like, "You're not going to get it right. That's okay." He goes, "But the fact that you're willing to try again, and that you do lose sleep over, am I doing it right? That's the sign of a good parent. So just give yourself a break." And some of the best advice I ever had, because I'm bad. I'm sure, man, if you're on a pro level, anything, there's a perfectionist in you. And if you can't do it at a certain level, why do it at all? And sadly, as a parent, I would feel like that. And my daughter's one of the most gracious people ever, is like, "Man, give yourself a break, dude. Just show up. Just keep showing up. And, you're going to get it wrong. You're going to say stupid things, and they're never going to forget it. And they're going to get therapy because of it one day. Keep showing up."
What would be your top 3 of your own songs that
that would be tough. Like for me, there's a song called "Finally Home" that's important to me. And that was just out of, it was written on the 10th anniversary of I Can Only Imagine. We were in the studio, and our label reminded us that they were thinking we wanted to re-record a new version or whatever. We're like, "No, we got the old one." And, but we're in the studio and started talking, and I was like, "Man, I can't believe it's been 10 years since I wrote that song," which was 10 years after, or about, like 8 or 9 years after my dad died. And so we were closing on 20 years of my dad being gone. And I was like, man, when my dad died, I was 19. I was nothing. I was trying to stay in college, which didn't work out. And I wanted to sing, but my dad wanted me to get just a regular job, because he knew, I mean, there was no American Idol or anything. It wasn't, and there was no YouTube. So saying you want to be a singer was like, okay, he's a janitor for the rest of his life or whatever. And so looking back, I was telling the guys, like, man, I wish my dad could see me now, with everything that's gone on. And I know people are like, he's looking down from heaven. And I don't know if that's true or not. There's no scripture that says that's actually true. Maybe he has more important things to do than stare at me all the time. I don't know. But I do know there'll be a time when I get to kind of refresh his memory if he doesn't know of all the things that have happened. And it just, that moment became really emotional. And so Finally Home came out of those conversations of, like, it was kind of like closure to Imagine, if you will, that song. And so that was always been special to me. Even If has always been, and it's funny because when favorite songs to me aren't like they were this successful or whatever. It's just, it's whatever I was going through. And I'm not one to sit around and listen to our songs very much, but when you're writing them, you have to hear them a lot. And so that's the time when they minister to me, is trying to solve the puzzle and how it gets said. And whenever the melody and the lyric and everything fits just right, it's like, it's got to be like a drug. It's exhilarating. And, I remember when the movie we first got approached about the movie. I started going to counseling for grief counseling over my wife's brother was 19, was killed in a car wreck in 2004. And it was a really weird time. And I just went into this really deep depression, and, I'm supposed to be a Christian, never get counseling. Jesus is my counselor or whatever. And I decided to go and, really process a bunch of stuff. And it's the first time in my life that I ever connected my childhood with the way I handle things, stuff like that. And it just so happened that the movie was being made at the same time. I didn't get it because of the movie, but without that counseling and being able to unpack my childhood, that movie could have wrecked me, to not be prepared to see that stuff on the screen for the first time would have been devastating. And so God was definitely in that. And in that, I wrote a song called Dear Younger Me, that was incredibly therapeutic to me, of just and it was out of a counselor saying, if you could just write the letter to this, 11-year-old kid, what would you tell him? And dude, I chewed on that question for a year. It's nervous about it's going to happen. And I only have 5 minutes, whatever. It's I'm so stressed. And I'll just never forget. There's a line in the bridge that just says if I could change everything, if there's one thing I wish you'd know or whatever, it would be, dear younger me, it's not your fault. You were never meant to carry this beyond the cross. And I remember writing that and having to sing it over and over because I couldn't stop crying every time I'd do the vocal. So that's definitely one that is, it's my favorite because they're all my songs are like children. And, that was a very special kid to me, just the process of creating that one. And then Even If was the same kind of thing. My oldest son, I've got 5 kids. My oldest just got married. He's 21 and, he was diagnosed with, juvenile diabetes when he was 2. And so we, dealt with that his whole life. And, man, when Even If came about, I can't remember what exactly, I just had one of those days to where, if you've dealt with any kind of chronic illness, just the fact that it never lets up, you just have moments to where you can't do it anymore. And a friend of mine, an artist named Tim Timmons, one of my dear friends, I was at his house and I was supposed to write a song with him, and I just started venting on, it's just not, give me something that goes away. Give me something that heals. Give me, and just couldn't take it anymore. And, I didn't want to write. And so I was leaving and I told him, I said, man, I just want to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When it all hits the fan, I want to have enough courage one day to say, even if God doesn't show up, I can still do this. I wasn't saying that I was that guy. My desire was, I wish one day I could be that guy. Make that clear. Half of these songs sound like I'm super Christian, and all of them are like, I am so inadequate. And this is all the things I wish I could be. And Tim sent me this voice memo, and he wrote the chorus to Even If 5 years before, because Tim has been dealing with a cancer that he's living with for 12 years. And he wrote just a couple lines of the chorus. And he goes, here's something that I was in your same boat and could never figure it out 5 years ago. And I wrote the rest of it in 5 minutes. It unlocked something. And it was between that story, Shadrach, Meshach, and then also just the old hymn of man, I wish I could honestly say that something is truly well with my soul, that I could be okay with that and not let it consume me. And, and so all of that was, it's not having it together. It's quite the opposite. It's God, this is all going south very quickly, but somehow, somebody wrote me, I can't believe you're so brave to still worship through all this. It's no. I'm not brave. I have to worship through it or it'll be the death of me. It's not, I'm not worshiping because I got it together. I'm worshiping hanging by a thread. I have to keep worshiping the same way that we get in the word when things are going poorly. I have to do it. I have to. But yeah, so those 3, and for a long time have been when people ask, what are your favorites? Those are the 3 that come to mind. I love Imagine, don't get me wrong. And
of course,
I'm grateful for it, but those are and that was therapeutic, almost 30 years ago. Oh no, I guess it's been 20 years or 22 years ago now. But these are more recent and just mean a lot to me.
Well, that's, they're personal to you more than anybody else. And so these songs would mean something special to you that none of us could ever understand. But, it's got to be unbelievable, just humbling, the the times I know that God has really used me, because of what I do. What's the one song that as soon as you started writing it, you said you knew it was going to be a hit? And then the one song that you were writing that you thought was going to be a hit.
Yeah, totally.
And how does that process work? Do you just kind of feel like this one's going to be the one, or maybe there's one you wrote one time that you thought, oh, this is going to be terrible, and everybody loved it,
Yeah, there's definitely different approaches to writing, like the Dear Younger Me's and Bring the Rain, and Even If. Those are like, I feel like they were written with no one else in mind. Like, if it never made the album, I wouldn't really care because it kind of served its purpose for me personally. Then there are others that literally we are trying, to write a banger, if you will, like right. This is what radio wants. So the one that I knew would be a hit was probably Flawless. That sounds so arrogant, but I'm just saying, when we wrote it, we were so excited in the studio that we called the label immediately. And it was one of the first ones we wrote for that album. We were like, we have the radio single, so now we're just going to do the rest of the album. Like, it was almost like we got that out of the way, because they'll pressure you, like, what's the single? What's it going to be? And we wrote that out of the gate, and we're like, yeah, that's the one. Let's push it aside and let's make whatever album we want now, because we made the label happy with the radio single.
Right.
And the one that I thought was going to be one which no one would hear about. We had an album called Coming Up to Breathe that had songs like Hold Fast and So Long Self and Bring the Rain. And this I don't remember what year it was. This is probably 2005. And the first song we wrote on that was a song called Safe and Sound. And I was like, we did it again. This song is going to be huge. Like, for some reason, I was so like, this is easy. And I sent it to the label. They were like, yeah, it's great. It's great. And then 2 more years of making the album, I feel like. It's almost like manna from heaven. Like, if you collect it and you keep it to yourself, it spoils. And that song went from one that I thought was going to be the single, the greatest. And then 2 years later, it was the oldest, and we were tired of hearing it before the album ever came out. And it just kept moving to the back of the line, to where at the last minute, we're like, all right, fine, let's put it on the album, this dumb song. It felt like you sit on it that long. That's the hard part, making an album. And people always ask, like, how the industry's changed, and that there's people don't make much money off streaming and Spotify and stuff, and there's some truth to that, but it's changing. Like, you can definitely make a living at it, but I always say the best part about it is music's getting from the artist to the fan faster than ever. Because the worst thing, man, it's when you write a hit, and then it's like, most of the time, if you write it, there's at least 6 months to a year before anyone will ever hear it, because you've got to finish the rest of the record. That's the typical timing. And it's hard to be excited about something that, especially when you write at that moment, whatever emotion it stirs up, that's the thing. It's like, that's what makes you want to put on the album, because it stirred something inside of you. And to hang on and keep telling yourself, this is going to stir something in somebody else, hopefully, because I'm so done with it. Because it's like, 6 months to a year, it's like, we have a song right now that our next single, I think, is a song called To Not Worship You. And it was supposed to be on our last album, Inhale, Exhale. And so it got pulled off that. I can't remember why. I think because we thought it could be a radio single. We had our singles picked. So we said, this is weird. And we're in the pandemic when we made the album. Let's set it aside, and maybe it could be a single for the next album. And I hope it'll work out fine. But for us, it was a mistake, because now we're looking at a solid 3 years since the song's been written. And whenever we listen to the album, I skip over it every day, because I'm like, if I'm listening, I'm like, nah, that song's so stinking old. And then we'll have friends call and go, man, this is the song. And we're like, no, it can't be. It can't be. It's so old. There's new, I'm fond of these newer songs. And the label had to set us down and go, you have to stop looking at the song as old. No one else has heard it. It's the one. And so it's funny, because we're trying to stir up this emotion. Like, we're super excited about a song that is literally 3 years old, like was finished and mixed 3 years ago. But in your head, you're like, if it wasn't good enough to be a single immediately, what are we doing? But it was part of the plan, was let's wait. And so anyway, that's a weird feeling to, we got a brand new song for you guys. It's a 2-year-old with a mustache and beard and 7'3", but you're going to love it. It's brand new. That's what it feels like.
So I have a question for both of you guys. You're both dads, and we talked about this a minute ago. Bart talked about this. Bart, your son is now taking the baton a little bit, and I know you guys performed on one of your albums. Mark, your sons and your children have had success in athletics. What's it like being the parent and seeing your kids have success in the fields that you played in and that you are passionate about?
Man, I don't know about you. I didn't try to talk my kids out of it, but I wasn't I didn't want to be the coach whose son's the quarterback kind of guy growing up. But also like I didn't know that all my kids can sing. We moved to Nashville when he was 12, and that was a hard time for him from Dallas. That was a hard time for a 12-year-old, and he went through a little bit of depression, and we got him a guitar, and the guitar became his best friend with the lessons and all stuff. And I knew he played, but literally never heard him sing. Like he was almost embarrassed to let me hear it. There'd be times I'd slide my phone under his door trying to hear him, and he'd kick it out. And when he was 15, I remember we let him have an Instagram account. And one night I'm laying in bed, and my wife's looking at her phone, and I hear this guy sing, and honestly, I was like, hey, that's really good. Like, that's really good. And my wife's crying, and I'm like, well, he's not that good. What's going on? Like, what's happening here? And she's like, this is your son. And it was it was just so good. Like, honestly, like without me knowing it was him, I was on board. And up until that point, I always thought, man, if they can sing, like, am I gonna, I didn't want to assume that they're, like you have the mom goggles on, where they call it, where it's like, he's the greatest ever, and he's not. And so I was real careful, and I didn't want to like talk him out of anything. But also I knew, it is harder. The music industry is so hard, especially now versus when we were doing it just to make a living. And so I just kind of waited and kept watching, and I saw this kid that was incredibly passionate and just, kind of, I would say saying all the right things. Like, I'll just live on love. I don't care. I just want to make music, even have to work at Home Depot or whatever. And I was like, sounds like I did. Like, the best advice I was given is if you can walk away from ministry and this stuff, go ahead and do it, because we don't need people that are putting about 50% in this thing and not everything they have. I never forgot that. It actually, I kind of hesitated going into ministry and doing this because of that advice, but I would still tell my kids that. And I could see it in Sam, and he's like, he's going to do it regardless. And that's kind of what I was wanting to see. And he is incredibly talented. And so when that point came, and then I kind of became, I will do everything I can to help you, if you want it. But I just want to make sure it was like, I didn't want to end up being entitled where he's like, no, I want to do this now. But it's like, he was going to do this with or without me. And that's when I was like, man, I'll do everything I can to help you in this. And it's been an amazing relationship. There's a lot of times where he thinks I'm an idiot and he doesn't think I know what I'm talking about. When it comes to music and stuff, he does have a respect that like he'll listen to me and take my advice. I may not know it until he tells my wife later, this is what Dad said. I'm like, oh, okay, he was listening. But yeah, I'm his biggest fan. I'm still right now on a spiritual side. I'm like, I just praying that he just keeps understanding more of who he is in Christ, because he has the goods, but he's a kid, and I didn't know what I was talking about at 20 or 21, and now he's married, and it's like I just there's just there has to be this this click moment that happens between him and God, and he's I think he's struggling with being angry as a diabetic his whole life and has a lot of questions, and it's just and just giving him room to process that. And he's got the talent. And when that clicks, it's like he could be an unstoppable force. We'll see. But it's amazing to watch. And, and that's, I do everything I can to help him. But then also I try to stay out of the way, because what's sad with him, and I wonder about this, because if you have a child who has a parent that is remotely successful, and then they go in that field or, something similar, of all the success I've had, and then my son has, especially my oldest, has been around his entire life. He was born the week that Imagine went number one. All he remembers is the moments to when I get home and I'm frustrated because I've created such a machine that, that if I want to sit on a porch and smoke a cigar with one of my friends from church, I have to look over my shoulder, or, make sure no one's watching, or have to say the right things all the time. And of all the things that we've had, and those are the things he remembers is like, I don't want to be backed in a corner. Like I don't have to be this all the time. And he's not talking about a Christian. He's talking about that whole, the switch is always on. Somebody's always watching. And those are far and few between versus the amount of fun and great things that have happened. But it's funny. Those are the things that resonate with him, that he's like, I would rather, like to the point to where like Need to Breathe and Colony House, these bands that are kind of believers, kind of have a foot in both markets. He'd rather do that. And cause he's like, don't call me a worship leader unless I realize what it means to truly lead worship, which I do appreciate him even saying that. But he's so scared of like, he doesn't want to he loves music so much right now that he doesn't want to be bitter towards it one day. And I've told him that too. One day it's going to become your job. So you enjoy it as long as you can, if you do this right. And so anyway, I just told my wife the other day, it's curious what he remembers more than anything are those handful of times where I came home and was hurt somehow. And I don't know. It's just interesting what they choose to store in their memories.
I know my boys both played basketball and both played, were both very good players, played at the college level. And, but yet it got to be comical to me, probably not comical to them in a lot of ways. But like the first question anybody ever, can you shoot as good as your dad? And I'm like, that's just, why does somebody have to go there? You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's just and my youngest son, he's, if you ever met him, my older son's a lot more serious. So he would kind of take that to, it would bother him a little bit. Whereas my younger son, he'll just kind of come right back and be like, well, no, but you can't either. And neither can anybody else, kind of deal. And, just that way. But yeah, but it's just, it's something that they can't, unfortunately, it's nothing we can do about it. That's something that God brought in our lives. They can't ever totally get away from being our sons and, or daughters or whatever. And what comes with that and expectations, if you play in the same field or if you sing in the same field or whatever, those things are going to come. And so you just try to help them navigate it the best that they can and let them know, hey, I love you, you got your own path. And, follow God and do your own path and know that I love you. And I mean, our best times, we just getting out in the driveway and shooting hoops, together and doing those kinds of things when nobody's watching. It's just us and just spending time. We go back to that, relationship we talked about earlier, man. It's just being there, just showing up. I mean, my kids didn't care about Mark Price, the basketball, star. I'm dad, and they just want to hang out with dad. And
my question is, in the driveway, can they shoot as good as their dad?
Most days, no.
Okay.
Most days, no. But I can't move like they can, and they're both like 4 or 5 inches taller than me. So the one-on-one stuff went away a long time ago.
See, the good news, what I love about that was, I told my wife one day, I was like, I'm glad I'm like Carl Lewis or somebody to where one day they're going to outrun me, but if you have a shot, or it's like every once in a while you go, okay, big boy.
Yeah.
I can still sing, but I'm not doing anything physical like that. But it's like, at least you have a shot. It's like, put that on the table if you need to.
At the end of the day, if it's not going well, I can always say, all right, let's get to the free throw line, guys. Get to the free throw line.
That's amazing.
Well, my kids are trying to be intramural champions. So
there you go.
I don't fit in this conversation at all. But probably one of the top questions we get for Mark is, what was it like being on the road as an NBA player? The challenges, the things that come up, the temptations, all those things. Mark's answered that question a few times. Both of you can weigh in here, but what's it like being on the road, being in the spotlight, being on tour all the time, away from our families? What is that like, and how do you fight those temptations? That's the number one question we get.
Well, I know for me, I always say, I don't know how solo artists do it, because the other 4 guys in the band are like my best friends, and we've been together for 28 years, and so I couldn't imagine doing any of this without them. And so, my wife says, you have the greatest job in the world because you get to work with your best friends, and she's not wrong. and we're still to this day incredibly close. And so that's been people are like, how do you keep it together? I'm like, there are 4 other guys that won't allow me to let it fall apart. Like, I can't imagine being a solo artist and paying all of your friends, if you will, and the people on the road are on salary. But the 5 of us are like, it's not that things don't go wrong, but if they do go wrong, it doesn't take very long to try to address it, if you will. And I wouldn't have it any other way. And so, I do, of the 5 of us, I would say I hate touring the most at this point. And hate's a harsh word. I still love doing it. I love being on stage. I love doing what we're called to do. The days, we're playing basketball arenas. It's got to be the same. The towns look the same. The arenas look the same. And we just stay we get so tired of getting off the bus to go to the hotel. We just live on the bus at the arena all day. So, we started bringing motorcycles a few years ago just to get away from the venue because it was just, we were going crazy. And so saying goodbye is the hardest thing to my family. Coming home is the best thing, to be with my family. And the good news for us doing it this long is that, with basketball, you're either in or you're out. With us, I don't know if we'll ever retire or call it quits. We'll just do less shows. Like we do about 50 shows a year now versus almost 300 for a long time. And people are like, man, 50 is still a lot. It's like, no, there's 52 weekends in a year. If I told you my job was to work only 2 days on the weekends for the whole year, that's a pretty sweet job. And that's not even 50 still. And so, it's challenging. I will say that, we stayed healthy in the pandemic and the pandemic was unbelievable for our family because I'd never, it's one thing to be on vacation, but for the whole world to press pause to realize that I'm going to be off for a year and no one's gotten ahead of anyone else. There's not like if that makes sense, it's like you come home from vacation, you're playing catch up. We were all in the same boat. And so there were days where the most important thing that I ever had to deal with was what kind of ice cream me and my 11-year-old Sophie were going to have that day. And I hope it never happens again, but just to have the awareness to realize I'm never gonna have my kids this age. I'm never gonna have this season again. And as long as we stay healthy, it's like, and I can't go anywhere, literally. And it was an amazing time. Like I'll never forget one day at church after the pandemic, the pastor got up and said, when you think of the pandemic, like say it out loud, like a couple of words, what comes to mind? And one guy was like, just trying to survive or whatever. And then one guy yelled, "Saved my marriage." And I was like, man, my marriage wasn't in dire needs, but it did wonders for as a parent and as a husband during that time. And it made me, I remember having a meeting right in the middle of it when we didn't work for 17 months. And I didn't know if we'd work again. Didn't know what it'd look like. And I remember having a meeting with the band right in the middle of it going, hey, I think I'm ready to be done. And they're like, no, wait, not now. We're just trying to, and I was like, well, I just want to go back to 40 or 50 shows. Like we were probably doing 80 or 90 at the time. And they all kind of stopped and realized, well, I said, let's survive. Let's get back to where we can, because we were just draining our account, just trying to stay. We kept all of our crew and everybody on salary the whole time. And let's just get back to where we're comfortable. Now I'd like to just slow it all down and realize they were all feeling the same way. And so I have a bittersweet relationship with touring. I enjoy the shows. I really do. I still do. But I've never enjoyed or wanted to be home more than now, and yeah, so and just blessed to have the opportunity to even let that be a consideration that we can slow things down and not, have to get 7 jobs or whatever. It's this is as close as musicians get to retiring, I think.
I'm sure. And we've talked about it. Aaron and I have on this show, and that's, you kind of have that built-in accountability with your friends and your band guys. And that is so awesome to have because you can't survive without that. I mean, right. From, my perspective as a professional athlete, I kind of had to create that, wherever, I was at to, have that core kind of group of people that were going to, help keep us all on track. And, as you're going through all the craziness of travel and seeing different cities. And like you mentioned, people used to say, well, what's Chicago like? What's LA like? And I'm like, well, got a pretty nice hotel and the gym's pretty cool.
Right.
That's it. I don't get to see much else. And so, there's that bright lights. Everybody thinks, oh man, that would be cool to travel all over the place. It's really not that cool. I mean, it's just like, that you do get to see some neat things and have some great experiences. But yeah, it was always a challenge, particularly when you have family and it's making that work and coming in and out and leaving and coming back and all those different things that are always challenged. But, staying in the Word, like you said, having people around you that are going to hold you accountable and to realize that, hey, man, the reason I'm doing this right now is God's allowed this to happen. I need to honor and glorify Him in all that I do. And that's the goal and the challenge. But I know, man, I know we've kept you a good bit here and we need to close this thing up. But, in closing, from the faith aspect of our lives, if there's one thing that kind of jumps out at you right now, what that God's kind of teaching you that you can encourage others with, what would that be?
Man, it's probably been the same thing I've said for quite a while, that the thing that we try to say on a nightly basis is, I think now more than ever, it's so important to be reminded that there's nothing we can say or do to make Jesus love us any more than He already does right now. And, and maybe it's me personally, I beat myself up and wish I could be better or should be better or whatever. And I think people need to be reminded of, hey, on your best possible day, He's not going to love you anymore. But more importantly, on your worst possible day, He's not going to love you anymore. And I think we forget about that. And things become so performance based and so, and it's just, that's, I think since 2015, that's what we've kind of decided, that we're going to try to show people what grace and identity is and try to remind people who they are in Christ and how we need to stop trying to clean up before we get in the shower, if you will. And just allow ourselves to be loved by the greatest thing ever. And it sounds simple. It sounds like a Sunday school answer, but maybe they were onto something, because it's, after I just turned 50 and it still feels like the most important thing we could tell people.
No doubt. And, we just appreciate your heart. So thankfully you came on a podcast today. It's been fun for me, because basketball obviously was my first love. The music's always been my second love. I grew up singing gospel music with my family. And,
oh, it's awesome.
And, my first, I really got into contemporary Christian music when it first got started. We can have another episode another day, all the different groups from Sweet Comfort Band to the Imperial.
Heck yeah.
All the way down. And oh, by the way, I meant to say too, my first cousin is Denise Jones, who's part of Point of Grace.
No way. Oh, I knew that. I knew this. This is the Oklahoma connection. I knew this.
Yeah. So I love music, and you guys minister to me. It's been a big part of, my life, my whole time. So having you on today has been a really, really treat for me. And I will give you one Larry Bird story, since he was your favorite. There's always the rumors, but this is my first time to ever get invited to the 3-point shootout contest at the All-Star game. And Larry Bird was part of that group. And so they put you all in a locker room together. You're sitting there kind of waiting to get called out on the court and go do our thing. And it's getting closer and closer to the time, and everybody's there, but Larry's not in the room. And about 5 minutes before we go to walk out on the floor, the door opens up and Larry sticks his head in the door. And he says, "Oh, sorry about that, fellas. This must be the room for second place."
Oh, my.
So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So that's Larry Bird's story for the day. But anyway.
It's all, yeah, we can have an episode about I have so many dream team questions. I'll corner you at some point. And
there we go. There you go.
I'll get those scheduled in. And I got to tell you guys, as a fan of basketball and music as well, thank you both for your ministry, for your testimony, and for guys like me that need role models and people to look up to and people to help strengthen our faith. Bart, thank you for the music. Mark, thank you for your testimony. So this is a dream for me to just sit here and just be a fly on the wall with this conversation. It was amazing.
That's awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.